All right, we're here with Tony and his S2000. So tell me, why did you buy an S2000 in the first place?
What's going on, guys? So the reason why I got an S2000, it's kind of funny how it actually came about. I have a Del Sol also at home, and I always loved the two-seater of the Del Sol. And the reason for getting that car was it had the targa top like a Corvette. And I was like Corvettes. So one day when I was working at BMW, this was a trade-in on a Z4. Came across the idea and I'm like, man, you know, still a two-seater S2000, you know, compared to other cars that are out there. It's not as fast as, you know, the Corvettes of the time, but it was still a fun, cool two-seater, you know, roadster. So it had the Honda reliability. And that was something definitely that I was after. It was a pick between this or a ZHP package 330i, but the BMW was automatic, so that was a no-go for me. And the other plus for this, it was a bone stock car, so that was a good thing.
Damn, man, this is far from bone stock now.
Yeah.
What made you want to supercharge it?
So last year, I supercharged the car. I've had the car now for a little over 6 years. I bought it in January of 2013, and all motor was fun, but it made 252 horsepower to the wheel. On a Mustang dyno. I know a lot of guys will say, oh, you know, it reads high or whatever, but either way, car still pulled hard and it ran fun all motor, but I wanted more power. So I was getting tired of Mustangs and Corvette guys and Challengers and Camaros all picking on me. And so at that point I was like, man, I gotta do something. And the Del Sol's turbo, so that one's sleeper for sure. That's like Mustang killer all day. This, I was like, man, there's no way my rear-wheel drive car that's supposed to be Honda's, you know, quote-unquote real sports car is gonna be slower than my, you know, Del Sol. So I talked to a buddy of mine, became really good friends with. His name's Kenny Velasquez. He's over in Texas, in Houston. He actually had a Del Sol too, turboed, B16 setup and everything, and I had bought Del Sol parts from him a couple years ago. And come to find out, he's pretty much my twin. We have both 06 white S2000s, so it's the exact same car. So the supercharger setup I bought from him came off of his car and put it on my car. Cool story about it was IBOC meet here in Orlando of last year. He actually flew here from Texas. He shipped it out about a week prior, put everything together, and we went to the IBOC meet with the car supercharged. So it's kind of like a last minute, you know, oh damn, you know, he boosted his car, you know, it was like everyone's kind of surprised. So it's pretty cool.
So with the supercharger, what kind of numbers are you making right now?
So last time on 12 pounds, the car, I had it on the dyno. I was curious to see what it made. We street tuned it, I'm sorry. And the car made 352 horsepower on bad transmission and a bad wheel bearing. So then I opted to go back up to, because I had detuned it for street use. I had opted to go back up to the other pulley, which is 85 millimeter instead of 90, which in turn from what Kenny has told me is supposed to be 17 PSI. According to the map sensor, it's pulling about 15 pounds now, but it does keep up with 400 horsepower cars. So at that point, you know, and it was like proven 400 horsepower cars. Z06 C5 Corvette, 2016 SS Camaro, bolt-on, you know, Evos. You know, I've raced multiple cars that have had around that 400 horse mark. And those 400 horsepower cars that I have raced have also had bolt-ons. So being the fact that the car still keeps up with those, it's, you know, it's fun power. Yeah, you can make more power if you go turbo, but to me, it's a good all-around use. So it's something that, you know, I can jump in. It's still got the Honda reliability. The main reason for me going supercharged over turbo was one simple factor. This is my daily. So if something happens, I still want to be able to drive it home. If I was turboed and the turbo breaks, or you have an oil feed line or a turn line that's bad, bye-bye, you got to have it flatbedded to your house. Supercharger belt breaks, you could drive it home, which it did happen to me once already.
It's never left you stranded, huh?
No. Only one time I got stranded. It was last year in October, and it was out of the blue. I had snapped an axle We think it's due to the fact that it was just metal fatigue, being the fact that my car now is high mileage. It just randomly broke. I wasn't even racing with it. I shifted the second gear, let off the clutch, and pop goes the weasel, and just car wouldn't move. So it kept rolling, but no power when I hit the gas. So
You said it was high mileage. How many miles do you have in the car?
So originally I got the car with 92,400 and something miles back in 2013. Now it's at 241,000 miles. I boosted it at 220,000. And to give people an idea of Honda reliability, I went to Tail of the Dragon at 145,000 miles. And I went to Sebring and did my first track day at 178,000 miles. And no issues whatsoever. So that was a good thing.
So somebody looking at these with maybe like a little bit of mileage on it, maybe like around 100,000, you know, they're not looking at a bad car. In other words, they're looking at a pretty good, reliable car no matter what.
You're not looking at a bad car as long as the car is maintained. I've seen some with like, to be honest, I had a customer's car come in, it had 8,000 miles on it. And it was a lawyer. He bought the car from California, had it transported here, did all the maintenance on it for all the fluids on the car, and it come to find out it still had the factory fluid in it from '05. So at that point, you know, when I showed him the fluids and showed him the pictures of everything of what, you know, was corresponding with the car, at that point it was like, okay, cool, you know, I got the peace of mind, bought a clean S2000, got all the fluids changed, everything was perfect, and happy, you know, knowing peace of mind that everything was good with the car now. So
What a great car, man. So beside the supercharger, like what have you done to the car in terms of like modifications?
So all in all, everything's bolt-on. So, and the reason for that is if I ever want to go back to stock car for whatever reason, or if I wanted to sell it and part it out, I could. I didn't go wide body because of that. A lot of S2000 guys, you know, they say, oh, you know, if you plan on keeping the car, you know, why don't you do fender flares in the rear, or, you know, cut the quarter panels? And to me, I've heard different stories. I've heard, you know, that it can ruin your title status if it's clean or rebuild title. This car is clean title, so that's kind of another reason why I haven't done it. But list of mods so far: the Craftworks C3892. I have an AP1 flywheel with a competition stage 4 clutch, 6-puck clutch. Still has stock header on it. Has J's Racing 70RR stainless exhaust from test pipe back. So it has a test pipe with the whole exhaust. J's Racing Type 1 wing, Mugen style hardtop, soft top delete, Cusco 4-point roll cage, Bilstein PSS9 coilovers with Ibach springs, upgraded spring rates, CCW LM20s, and other than that, it's pretty much aesthetics. As far as performance, it's just basic performance stuff, nothing super crazy, you know, besides obviously the supercharger, and Honda tune also with the ECU.
So when does VTEC kick in?
So when the car was stock, VTEC was at 6,200 or around there, 6 to 62. When it was all motor, we had it tuned at 4,100, and then when we went supercharged, it was lower down to 3,800. So now, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, why so low? You know, older Hondas, you'd have to worry about oil pressure. Newer Hondas, not so much. That low of an RPM, the car, you know, it's still high RPM somewhat. So it's high enough where you're already, you know, into the 80 to 100 PSI of, you know, oil pressure. So, and VTEC, you know, obviously is based on oil pressure. That's where these cars kind of like it.
So the car pretty much pulls like from down low all the way up.
Yeah, so being, you know, belt-driven supercharger, you have down low torque all the way from idle. I've only launched the car one time being supercharged, and it literally takes off like a bat out of hell. I mean, literally, being the fact it's an 06 plus car, it does have traction control. We mess with the settings a little bit where it doesn't retard the timing and you know, interfere with the throttle too much. So it still had a little bit of tire slippage, but nothing crazy. But even on motor, with the right setup and driving the car, and honestly, I've driven a lot of different cars out there, this is the first car where you really had to learn the car. You know, and being the fact I've driven, I mean, anything from S2000 all the way to 911 Turbo or GT3 RS, you know, I mean, those are badass cars. Like, there's no doubt about it. You know, they're awesome. But when you can keep up with some of those cars for a fraction of the price and still have the reliability and the fun factor, that to me is what really makes the S2000 an S2000. You know, it has that all-around package where, you know, when I was all motor, I used to use Mobil 1 up until I hit 206,000 miles, go buy an OEM filter from the dealer, and then go to Walmart and buy a $26 Mobil 1 full synthetic 5-quart jug. And you could do your oil change for less than 40 bucks. Whereas you have, you know, for example, new Huracan, you bring it in for its first oil change is gonna cost you over $1,000. Great car, but does it really make sense to go spend that much more money when you're driving a Huracan? I mean, those guys don't really care for $1,000 oil change because they got the money to do it. But us guys, you know, that are at home, you know, trying to do, you know, at-home maintenance or, you know, little things here and there, this to me it makes sense. You know, being a street car, you know, you don't really want to have something super crazy out there because in reality, where are you gonna go? This is already now making probably close to 420 horsepower at the wheel with it being on this pulley.
You know how much torque it makes?
Last time we dynoed, it was around 280, 278, I think, to 280, somewhere in there. I've thought about, you know, trading in this car. I looked at getting an E46 M3. I've looked at C5 Z06. I've always been a vet guy, so, you know, my dad's a vet guy. I grew up with Corvettes around, so that's always been my thing. But I've looked at that. I've looked at, it was an E46 M3, a Lotus Elise. Then I really wanted a Lotus Exige because it's going from Supercharged back to NA. You know, there's two different versions of the Exige for those of you guys out there that don't know. They do have the naturally aspirated version with the suspension and aero upgrades, and they have the Exige S, which is supercharged. Same thing for the Evora and Evora S. I also almost looked at an Evora, but every time I jump back in this, I kept telling myself, is it worth it? Higher insurance, higher maintenance cost, higher, you know, cost of modification for parts. I mean, you look at a clutch or even brakes, for example. You look at brake setup, you know, big brake kit for this car from StopTech is around $2,200. You look at AP Racing or StopTech for a Lotus, you're jumping in the $2,600 to $3,000 range, you know, somewhere in there by the time it's all said and done. And me being the fact that I've always done the maintenance on my car and done all the modifications myself, it's definitely saved me a lot of money.
What's the purpose of this car, and is it heading in any sort of direction? Like, is it supposed to be a daily, a track car, a drag car, an autocross car? What is?
So, the purpose with this car, it's funny. So, everyone's like, oh, go turbo. And I'm like, no, I have a turbo Del Sol at home. I want to do something different. So, I want to go supercharged. Keeps the linear power of an S2000, so it still feels like an S2000. This car right now, the way it's set up, to me, it's a good all-around combination. So I can take it to the drag strip, have fun. Not the fastest thing out there, but still fun to go out there. Autocross, definitely. I mean, go there or go to a track day, you're definitely gonna be running with, you know, fast guys out there. I mean, you know, the guys that have GTRs or Corvettes, like, they're like, man, like, you know, S2000s, they respect it because they know that it's a capable car. When you go out there, and you know you're having fun, but at the same time you're not being looked at like, oh, it's just another rear-wheel drive car. You know, they're like, oh, okay, cool. You know, it's an S2000. It's always been that car that people look at like, all right, so it's cool looking, you know, and it does good work too. So,
how was it dailying this car, by the way? Was it rough?
Yeah, so it's been my daily for 6 years.
Damn, 6 years straight.
Yeah. So at one point, I did get the Del Sol running, and I stopped dailying it for about a month or so to try and keep the miles off. But then the Del Sol also is another race car. That car is more for straight line. Has no AC, no heat, no power steering, no radio. So that car is mostly just, you know, for drag. So I got kind of tired of dailying that for a little bit. So I just jumped back into this and then kept dailying this. So I will be getting a daily soon though for both cars, so that way I can still keep the miles off of this. But to be honest, I've even thought about another S2000 for a daily that I can just rack up the miles and still have the operating cost, you know.
So would you get like a beater S2000, or would you?
I would pick one up used, you know, higher mileage for a cheap price, something that just looks decent to run with, you know, just to rack up the miles on. But a lot of reasons why too. So a lot of people get this concept, oh, well, you drive a sports car every day, it's not a daily. Well, technically, what is a daily considered? 4-door for space, yeah, I get it. SUV for space, minivan if you got kids for space. But what about a Corvette? What about an S2000? What about a Miata? There's a lot of people out there that have these cars as daily. Now, my main concern, if I were to switch, and I've noticed this when I do jump into another regular car per se, is a safety aspect. God forbid you have to brake or you have to turn out of the way in an emergency situation, this car will do it. I've been in situations where I was driving an SUV one time and this guy went to cut me off out of nowhere, pulling out of a parking lot, gas station, and literally cut across 4 lanes into traffic. And thank God it had performance suspension on it, but it luckily got out of the way. I was within inches of hitting him because of the fact that it's not made for performance. So when people think, oh, it's a performance car, it's not always 100% about, oh, I'm gonna drive fast. I wanna, you know, hit corners at 100 miles an hour. It also has to do with the fact that the car is more capable. It can brake 5 times harder. It can accelerate or corner 5 times harder than another regular car. So, in that aspect, from a safety standpoint, that's another reason why I kind of don't want to get a regular car for a daily.
One word to describe the S2000.
Great. It does have its flaws. So if I were to do a type of, you know, video per se, like a couple things that I don't like about the S2000, do I wish it had a little bit more space? Yeah. Do I wish the interior was a little bit bigger? Some days. Some days it feels fine, and some days I'm like, man, I feel cramped in here. It's a little bit tighter now with the cage in it. But other than that, maybe gas mileage a little bit better. But, you know, even on motor, it was okay. When it was stock tuned with just intake and test pipe exhaust, I did 320 miles on a full tank all highway with no aero on the car. So that to me, I mean, it's still pretty good. I mean, I know a new Accord will do 500 miles, but being the fact that the car is short geared and, you know, you're doing all highway, it's not horrible. But would I like to get what a new Corvette could get for gas mileage? Definitely. I mean, my dad has one. He has a C7 convertible. He averages from here to Miami, he'll get 34 miles a gallon. And I'm like, I wish I could do that. If I were to go to Miami, which I did back in December, it cost me there and back in one day $120 in gas. So being the fact that I had aero on the car, my wing, my splitter, my diffuser, and the fact it's supercharged, didn't really tune the car for gas mileage per se. It was only mostly for, you know, all around, but we didn't really go like too deep into the actual just, you know, cruising, you know, at like higher speed per se. We did it for like 70 mile an hour, but from here to Miami, I was doing like 80. So a little bit rich.
All right, you want to go for a drive?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
There you go.
Bro, I need to buy one of these so bad.